So you want to join us in Paranman. That's super. The only thing is, we had been playing for a few months before we decided to start recording, so it's now my job to get you up to speed so that you can jump in with our session 8 and still have some idea what's going on. Hopefully I can get all the important details while not making this video last a year and a half. So our story began in Danan province. There was a town in Danan that was struggling with bandits. Bandits kept ambushing merchants on their way to this town called North Lelix. And the bandits would ambush these caravans and steal their grain. And it's very early spring, and the inhabitants of this town are starting to get worried because they need this grain so that they can plant their crops for the new season. So, not used to dealing with trouble and not realizing how much something like this should be rewarded, this town offers a reward of 100 gold to anyone who can help rid them of these bandits. So we had quite a lot of people flock in to take on the challenge. 8 of them, as a matter of fact, the 8 player characters that you were introduced to in the intro video. The 8 player characters were told that they needed to work together to get rid of these bandits and retrieve the grain. They came up with a bunch of harebrained schemes that also involved hiding in a wagon and pretending to be potatoes, and thus began the first of many potato jokes. But eventually they did discover the bandit hideout, which was a series of platforms rigged up into trees. Through battle, they were able to defeat all but one of the bandits, which jumped down from the trees and escaped. Some members of the party pursued this bandit and questioned them for a little while. One thing they had noticed is that a lot of the bandits seemed to have black tattooed on their palms for whatever reason. And in questioning this bandit, they were told that their boss, their leader bandit, their female leader bandit, had instructed that they all get these palm tattoos. And they didn't really know why, but they were like, we just do what we're told. When no other useful information seemed to come from this bandit, the members of the party that had tracked her down, specifically Tau and Dalamore, killed her. Because they were like, well, our job was to get rid of the bandits, you're a bandit, so we're getting rid of you. They did this out of sight of Callum, who definitely would have protested had he known. Back up in the trees, the remaining people discovered a secret trapdoor that they opened, which led to a storage area where all the stolen sacks of grain were being stored. The party reunited in this storage area and also discovered some chests full of what appeared to be religious iconography. Many of the party had no idea what they were. They wouldn't have even known they were religious symbols if it weren't for people in the party who recognized them. Clover, in particular, was drawn to a brass sun medallion, and when she picked it up, she had been carrying for as long as she could remember a broken polearm. It had the staff and a piece of the blade, and when she picked up this sun emblem, the blade section of the polearm burst into flame and formed a flame glaive. So the flame was in the shape of the blade of a glaive. Say that 10 times fast. This is the point in which Clover moved from fighter class into Hexblade Warlock class. They gathered up all the grain that they could and started to head back toward the village, and as they were leaving, the trapdoor slammed closed. And when they looked up at it, they saw that on the underside of the trapdoor appeared to be a black handprint that had been burned into the wood of the door. They were like, that's weird. And they left. They couldn't take all the grain with them, but they intended to go back to North Lelix and let them know, hey, this is where it is, all the bandits are gone, so you're safe to go there and get all the rest of your grain. Unfortunately, that night, Piper was struck with a bad case of scheduling conflict and was not able to join us for the next session, so Piper was left in North Lelix with some kind of illness, while the rest of the party left. Having kind of made friends with each other, they agreed to escort Callum back to his temple. He had come to North Lelix to earn the money for his temple and their mission, and they were just going to escort him back since he's a little hapless. On their way to the temple, they passed a group of what appeared to be refugees, a group that was not in the mood for conversation, did not want to make eye contact, kept their eyes down, moved to the side of the road, dirty, bedraggled, and we learn that these refugee groups are fairly common throughout Danann. They're people who lost their homes in the Ascension War and now just kind of live a nomadic life, living off whatever scraps they can. They're most common in Danann because Danann province is fairly peaceful, so this is the safest place for them. Upon arriving at the Temple to the Rain Mother, which is Callum's home, the group noticed that on the large wooden doors leading into the temple, there was another black handprint burned into the wood. The people living in the temple said that they had noticed it crop up a couple days previously, and they didn't know what it was or how it had gotten there. They assumed it was just some kind of vandalism, but it hadn't hurt anybody, so they just left it. We got to meet Callum's adopted family, kind of a hodgepodge of all sorts. They spent the night there, but Tao, being her mysterious self, chose to spend the night out in the forest instead. And at one point during the night, Tao noticed that the black handprint on the door had begun to glow, as if it were made of embers. She examined it closely, but didn't know what to do about it, so just kind of went back to sleep in the trees while keeping an ear out. The next morning, when Tao decided to return back to the temple, as she opened the door to enter inside, the door exploded into flame, Tao narrowly escaping a lot of damage with her high dexterity. The flames from this explosion were very unnatural and burned even the stone of the temple. Luckily, Callum is a follower of the Rain Mother, and so water is kind of his thing. He was able to create water and put out the flames. But this was definitely shocking, and the rest of the day was spent trying to make repairs to these open doors. That evening, Callum's adopted father, Hilmead, pulled him to the side and suggested that maybe it was time for Callum to see the world, that maybe these people had come into his life so that he could get some more experience without being alone. Callum was definitely hesitant to do this, but he did agree, and they planned to set off for Danann Hall, the capital of Danann province, the next day. On their way to Danann Hall, a couple times in the night, they would see this blue light glowing in the distance. They were always too cautious to go approach it, though. So it appeared a few nights in a row, but they were like, we're not falling for it, light, stay away from us. So they left it alone. Arriving at Danann Hall, they discovered that there is, outside of the walls, a shanty town, which is a semi-permanent residence for these refugee groups. This is a group that has kind of attached itself to Danann Hall and lives off the scraps of the town, which might not sound super glamorous, but since the other option is just wandering begging from town to town, those who are able to establish shanty towns actually feel quite blessed, because at least they have a singular place where they can stay. Inside Danann Hall, they discovered that there had recently been some unrest. There had been an underground group who had been trying to essentially cause anarchy, trying to get the citizens of Danann Hall to rise up against their democratic government and overthrow it. The 3 ringleaders of this anarchist group were brought to trial. 2 of them refused to recant their beliefs and were hung in the town square. This is how our player characters learned about this, is they go into the town square and there are these 2 bodies hanging from the gibbet. Their 3rd anarchist, however, did recant and said, "I'm sorry, I have regrets, I won't do this again." And so instead of killing her, she was banished. All we know about her is that she was a half-elf woman and she left through the western gates. Tao, for whatever reason, was very interested in this half-elf woman and expressed a desire to pursue after her. So after finishing their business in Dannon Hall, doing some shopping, etc., the rest of the party agreed to go with Tao to pursue this woman, since they didn't have anywhere better to go. They left the town and headed west, back toward North Lelix, and they saw this light a couple more times, still didn't pursue it, until one time the light appeared and it was a different color. Instead of being blue, it was like a fiery orange-red. Pursuing that, they discovered that it was a torch held by a small gnomish man, who, upon further questioning, turned out to be Piper in disguise. Piper told them that they should not go back to North Lelix because the citizens had gone to retrieve the grain, as the party had instructed, and when they opened the trap door that led to the area where the grain was, it exploded and killed a bunch of them. So the citizens of North Lelix would very much like to question the members of the party to get down to the bottom of this, and Piper's pretty sure that they're angry enough to not be super reasonable. So Callum is incredibly distressed about this because Dannon is his home and he's very familiar with the people of North Lelix. He wants to return, but the party suggests maybe they should wait until things cool down, so instead he writes the first of many letters. Callum likes to write letters. And instead of heading west, the party decided to take the road that heads southwest. Along this road, they went to the town of Forsyth. In Forsyth, while heading toward the inn, they came across these two brothers who had a cart wheeling through the town, and they were being very suspicious about this cart. The party, being naturally curious, asked them, "What you doing?" And they were even more suspicious in their replies. So later, some of the party went out to go spy, to see what was going on, all without Callum's knowledge. We don't really tell Callum when we do bad things. So they head to the home of these two brothers after figuring out who they are, and they discover the two of them unloading a wagon of stones, and these stones are full of gold inlay. Naturally very curious, the party wants to know, hey, what's up with that? Especially Clover, who gets a weird feeling looking on the gold inlay. One she can't place. It's not quite a memory, but it's something. The brothers, under duress and threat, reveal that these stones are from a long-lost abandoned temple found in Depovia province. And it's just a treasure trove. They brought all they could carry, but there was more. Very intrigued by this, the party decides to make that their next stop, to head down into Dannon province and check out this temple. In what is more of a please leave us alone than a gift, these two brothers give the party a piece of this rock. And when they show that to Callum later, they say it is just a gift, to which Callum writes them a letter of thanks. So with their new rock and their new knowledge of this possible temple, they continue down the road south. While walking along this road, they discover another group of refugees, but this one is different in mood. They are armed, they are much more angry than they are despondent, and they are not friendly and not wanting to talk. So after an awkward attempt at conversation, our party is kind of like, okay, bye, and continues on down the road. That night, as they sleep, they are ambushed by some of the slummers, as they're called. During the battle, Callum notices that one man in particular doesn't seem to be in control of his faculties. Something in Callum's very high perception check causes him to notice that there's a bit of panic or regret in the man's eyes, like he can't control what he's doing. That makes Callum tell the people, don't kill this guy. I don't think he wants to hurt us. I think something's controlling him, which definitely causes Tao to hyper-focus. Tao instantly goes to kill the guy, and people are like, whoa, we just said don't do that. And Tao's like, this is my whole purpose and my mission. I have to kill him. Which leads us to Tao explaining a little bit of her backstory. Tao is part of a special clan whose job is to kill monsters called the Jahir. The Jahir are monsters that are incorporeal and instead possess people and force those people to do acts of anarchy and chaos, which is part of why Tao is wanting to pursue the half-elf woman who was riling up anarchy in Danon Hall. Tao says the only way that she's aware of to kill these beings is to cast a certain spell and then kill the host. Callum is naturally not super okay with that. Other party members express disgust, others see that it's the only way, but Callum says no, we absolutely cannot do this. Tao offers 30 minutes for him to find another solution before she has to. It's literally her life's mission to kill these things. Callum goes off to pray to his goddess to try and find some kind of other way. His prayers are answered in a very roundabout way. Callum is holding the temple rock as he prays, and he notices that as he prays, the temple rock gets wet, almost like it's got a morning dew on it that can never be wiped away. He comes back to the party and is like, look, something's happening. This must be an answer to our prayers. And he desperately tries to figure out what to do with it. He touches the rock to the man. He puts it down. But nothing works. And anytime Callum takes his hands away from the rock, it dries. Finally, Callum hands the rock to Clover. And in the instant both of their hands are touching the rock begins to steam. And the steam of this rock rises up into the air and begins to blow on an invisible wind in a southwest direction. The party thinks that perhaps this is a compass. They know that's the direction of the temple, but unfortunately they don't feel like they can just drag this man all the way to this temple. And so when the 30 minutes are up, Dalamore pulls back the man's head and Tao slits his throat and he dies. Emerging from his palms comes a black smoke that rises up into the air and then appears to be crushed in on itself until it shatters into oblivion and is gone. Upon inspection, they notice that all of the other members who attacked them, except the man who had been possessed, have tattooed palms, just with black ink. This was a very trying experience for many members of the party. They felt mentally and physically exhausted and continued on to this temple in a bit of a fugue. They were quiet. They asked some questions about religion, but it was hard to know even what questions to ask, especially because Tao is not one who's super forthcoming with information. So they continued on their way, skirting past any and all people and civilizations until they reached their destination, the Bright Mother's Temple in Depovia. Upon arriving, they noticed that the door had recently exploded, and the night before they had heard an explosion in the distance and seen smoke, so now they knew where it came from. The doors to the temple appeared to have exploded in a similar manner to the temples of the Rain Mother, and there were pieces of someone strewn around, some unlucky soul who had opened the temple. Upon coming closer, they see that most of the temple has been looted. A lot of the walls have been broken and torn away as people have attempted to get these gilded gold pieces out from the stone. Going further into the temple, though, they find a door that has been jammed closed for who knows how long, and they're able to break through it into an unsullied part of the temple. In this area of the temple, they find much of these gold reliefs. They also find several windows that look to have been bricked up. It was very Legend of Zelda-y in that there were these squares of bricked up spaces that were a brick that was different than the stone of the rest of the temple. They broke through one to discover that it did just appear to lead outside. It didn't lead to a secret chamber or anything. In one room, there appeared to be more intricate gold inlay than everywhere else. On one wall, there was a large sun about 4 feet in diameter, and most of the gold inlay in this temple has taken on the appearance of the sun or flames in some way. And this was by far the largest solid piece of gold that they had found so far. On that same wall, on the other side, were what looked like there should have been gold inlay in the shape of 2 figures. But it was like the inlay had been removed, so instead there were just these 2 dark recessed spaces of 2 figures. On the opposite wall, there were inlaid in gold 7 large figures standing over many smaller figures. There were also carved into the walls several words in Celestial. Callum was able to read the words, and this is my mistake as a DM. Sahalia also should have been able to read the words, but I forgot that she could speak Celestial, so she didn't at this point, but it won't happen again. Lorelei really wants to steal that giant sun, and she has been stealing little bits and pieces as they've been going through the temple because, she's a rogue from Brighter. That's what they do. As they continue to explore the temple, they find stairs that lead down, very far down. When they reach the bottom, they find a door that has no handle, but instead just has this gold plate where the handle should be. Clover presses her hand to this plate and the door swings open. They walk into a dark room that's roughly 100 feet in diameter and seems to be about 100 feet high. It's almost like a hemisphere, 100 feet in diameter down there. A lot of them have fire magic, so they light it up and they discover a big brass bowl in the middle of the room. And this bowl is full of ash. Clover moves forward and pokes it with her fiery glaive, and it lights up like the final Olympic torch. And up out of the flames rises a flame elemental that just stares at Clover. Stares at Clover for a long time, like it's expecting Clover to do something, and when she never does, a line of fire lights up around the edge of the bowl and slowly begins to go out like a timer. Dalamore is the only one quick enough to realize what's happening. He yells at people to run, and he runs out of the room, but he's the only one fast enough. Just as he escapes the room, the doorway becomes a wall of fire that cannot be passed through. The room gets hotter and hotter, becoming less and less habitable. Dalamore runs upstairs to try and figure out what to do. He goes to another one of the bricked-in windows and breaks it, but nothing happens. Finally, after a lot of thought and discussion and panic, Callum teaches Clover the words in Celestial that had been written in the room up above. Words like protection and sanctuary and courage and bravery. He coaches Clover on how to pronounce the Celestial. She speaks the words out loud. The flame elemental seems satisfied and collapses in on itself and forms into a small ruby, roughly 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter with a flat back. Clover takes this and wears it now in a pouch around her neck. As this is happening, both Clover and Callum have a vision in which they see their respective goddesses. Callum sees the Rain Mother, who tells him that she is proud of him and he is doing well. Clover sees who she believes to be the Bright Mother, who says something about Clover's father, which naturally piques Clover's interest. Sahalia is aware that something celestial is happening, but cannot see the goddesses as clearly as those two. After the dust settles, the visions are over, the party went upstairs and had some decompression and sleeping. They ate some food. Ugarth asked some questions about religion, after which he decided to go on a walk to think about it all. The next morning, Ugarth still hadn't returned, and they decided to break open the last remaining of these bricked-in windows. And as the sun streamed through this window, it hit the giant golden sun embedded on the wall on the opposite side. And as the sunlight hit this gold sun, there was a grinding from outside, and a hole opened up in the ground, and from the depths below rose up the brass bowl from the night before that the flame elemental had emerged from. Clover once again decided to poke the ash with her glaive, and once again, the bowl lit into a huge bonfire, but no flame elemental this time. So at least we didn't have to fight that guy again. They tried to put out the flames, but nothing seemed to be able to do it. Maybe it was just too big. Maybe it was magical. Who knows? They eventually decided to leave. Lorelei wasn't happy to be leaving without Ugarth, but they couldn't wait any longer, and they didn't know where he was. So off they went down the road. They decided to head back toward Bechtrit, which was the closest town, in order to get more supplies. While traveling down the road, the party runs into Ugarth, who has been walking and attempting to pray to the Rain Mother, but the only answer that he got was that it started raining, and he didn't love that answer. They gather up Ugarth and head toward Bechtrit. While in the city of Bechtrit, they learn a few things. First of all, Bechtrit is one of many towns in Depovia that has been completely militarized. What was once just a standard townstead has now been built onto and become essentially a military base. It's called Fort Bechtrit. While they're in Bechtrit, they begin to notice that a lot of the soldiers have an emblem of a sun sewn onto their uniforms in some place, and this is not something that any of our party have ever noticed before, even those familiar with Depovia and the military. So they're confused, and they ask around, and they discover that the sun symbol indicates those who are loyal to the Brigadier General Abelstern, who some call the Bright Lord Abelstern. He's looking for military reform and claims to be guided by the Bright Mother, hence the sun symbol. The party isn't sure because depending on who you talk to, Abelstern kind of sounds like a cult leader, or to others, he's just a reformist. It's unclear what his intentions are just from here, and there's probably only about 30% of the soldiers who have this sun symbol somewhere on them. While in Bechtrit, they also met Bonton, who is a young quarter-orc wizard who is looking for someone to escort him to the Wormskeep Castle Academy so that he can begin his magical studies. The problem is no one will take him there because all of his money is located at the Castle Academy, and so he can't pay until delivery. So no one's willing to take that risk, even though he's offering 500 gold to whoever can get him there. Our party, being just so altruistic, agrees to take Bonton to Wormskeep. Ugarth buys a cart and horse, and the group decides to head off to Wormskeep by way of Vajensky, which is the capital of Depovia, hoping to find out more information about this Abelstern fellow. Seeing all these people praying to their goddesses and seeing all of this happen, Piper decided to try praying to her patron. She's like, maybe my patron is a god. We'll see what happens. So Piper prays to her patron one night in her room at the inn, which she is sharing with Tao, and her patron appears as she prays, and the rest of the room seems to freeze in time. Even the flames of the fireplace seem to hold still. And this being, this female being who is hooded and shrouded to the point where features cannot be made out, talks to Piper and essentially tells Piper that she is an experiment. That they are trying something new with her in an attempt to stay hidden from someone. And Piper asks this being if she's a god or knows anything about the other goddesses, and this being seems scornful of the other goddesses, calling them shadows of gods. She also refers to herself a lot as a we, whether it's a royal we or if she's got some kind of split personality thing going on, we're not sure. But Piper does have an interaction with her patron at one point, face to face, able to ask her questions. The only other thing that we probably need to note about Piper is her arcane focus is actually a tattoo on her arm that almost looks like someone put ink on their fingers and dragged them down her arm. On the road to Vigensky, the party ran into a group of soldiers that was also heading to Vigensky after duty, and they decided to travel together. One soldier in particular found his eyes continually drawn to Dallimore, and Dallimore eventually confronted him about it. This soldier, who was a young man, probably about 15 or 16, said that Dallimore just looked familiar, to which Dallimore responded, "Yeah, I just have one of those faces." That's now kind of a running gag in the party because Dallimore has wine red hair and is covered in scars. He definitely doesn't have one of those faces. When the group finally gets to Vigensky, they do a little bit of shopping. They stumble upon an Idrashan Fletcher who, well, his mother was Idrashan. He himself has never been there. Tao bonds with him. He expresses concern over seeing Tao, knowing that she's from southern Idrasha. She doesn't necessarily console him. Then they go to the bookstore. For Bonton. He'd like to buy some books on magic, but while they're there, Clover decides to ask the bookseller if he has any books on religion. Typically, this would be a very weird question, and a bookseller would be like, no. But it just so turns out that this bookseller is probably one of the only religious scholars in the continent. It's just kind of been a hobby for him, and he is thrilled to bits that someone is asking him. His name is Stas, and they visited Stas a lot and asked Stas a lot of questions. I'm going to try to summarize the main points of what Stas told them. They asked Stas just about religion in general, and Stas revealed that most people believe there are 7 goddesses. The Bright Mother, located mostly in Depovia, is a goddess favored by warriors and has the symbol of the sun. The Rain Mother, found predominantly in Danan province, favors teachers, caring people, and her symbol is a raindrop. The Pale Lady is found primarily in Avanya, favored by aristocrats, lovely and fine. Her symbol is a silver disc. The Dark Watcher, found in Idrasha and Sikhen, is kind of more of a theory. There's not a lot of information on her. It's unclear if she's a goddess or perhaps a servant of a goddess or some kind of lesser being but still powerful. Her symbol is just a black circle. The Wild Mother, found mostly in southern regions of the country. Her symbol is a wildcat and amber. The Grey Mother, found up in Geeksadal. Her focus is on knowledge. Her symbol is unknown. The Earth Mother, also in the south. Her symbol is rock, and that's all we really know about her. They ask him about the black handprint, and at first he isn't sure. He's not aware of it. When they come back the next day, he's done some research and he's discovered that he wouldn't have noticed it if they hadn't asked. But in a few instances in his books, the symbol of the Dark Watcher, which is a black circle, appears to have been inked over a black handprint, and he can only just barely see the raised ink of the black handprint underneath the black circle. It's almost like there's been an attempt to hide or cover up this black handprint. That's the gist of what we get from Stas. A lot more is asked of Stas. Sahalia asks questions to Stas. Clover asks questions to Stas. Ugarth asks everybody. Everybody asks questions for Stas. That's probably the information that's going to be most pertinent to our story, though. In the midst of questioning Stas a lot, the group does continue their search for this Bright Lord Abelstern, this Brigadier General. They try to hunt him down, and eventually they do find him, and Clover immediately runs up and says, "Hi, do you speak to the Bright Mother?" He's a little overwhelmed by that, and says, "I never claimed to speak to her. Excuse me, I'm busy." and just kind of walks away. We discover the reason why he's busy is because he sent 3 of his lieutenants to hunt down Dallimore. We cut to a different scene where Dallimore is walking down a street and then gets cut off by these lieutenants and told that he has to come into custody for questioning. Dallimore comes peacefully for a little while, but then tries to run and is stopped by Abel Stern himself. Abel Stern grabs Dallimore and demands, "Is anyone else alive? Were you the only survivor? Is Gable alive?" Dallimore kind of breaks down and is forced to face these painful memories and go, no, it's only me. I'm the only one who lived. When things kind of calm down a little bit, Abel Stern asks if Dallimore will come to his quarters so that they can discuss this privately. The rest of the group kind of tags along and they're like, we're with him. But when they reach Abel Stern's quarters, it is only Abel Stern and Dallimore who talk. The others are asked to, the others volunteer to go sit in another room. Thanks, Callum, for being nice enough to volunteer for that. While they're talking, Abel Stern explains that he's so interested because Dallimore's captain, Gable, was aware of the location of an object of great importance. Abel Stern doesn't feel comfortable revealing why the object is important or any details on it, but he seems very interested in getting this object back. He asks Dallimore if perhaps he knows where Gable's wife is, because it's very likely that she has the object. Dallimore not only does not know where Gable's wife is, he was unaware that Gable was married. So that's something that he now has to consider. After realizing Dallimore doesn't have any more information for him, Abel Stern lets him go and retires to his private quarters. Dallimore rejoins the group, who is definitely disappointed that they weren't able to talk to Abel Stern, so Callum writes another letter where he just says, "You can reach us by contacting the bookseller Stas. We'll be here for a little while longer. We'd love to talk to you." And then he gives that note to Abel Stern's maid to deliver to him. The next morning is the day that they've decided to head out to continue their journey to Worm's Keep with Bonton. And Callum wants to visit Stas one more time. So he goes to the bookshop and notices that it's closed, and no matter how much he knocks, Stas never comes to open it. Callum, after being traumatized by everything that's happened, is sure that Stas is dead. He goes back to the party and is just clearly distressed. Dallimore and Sahalia come back with him, and together they break into the back entrance, where they discover that Stas has left a note for Callum. He just left it inside his locked shop. We don't know if Stas did that on purpose, knowing Callum would go there, or if maybe Stas was just a little scatterbrained and forgot to have the letter actually delivered. But the letter from Stas says that after hearing from them about this Bright Mother's temple, he has gone to see it himself, since he's a religious scholar and he's never heard of this temple, and he's eager to see it with his own eyes. The party is a little concerned about Stas traveling alone because he seems to be ancient, but there's not a lot they can do about it at this point, so they head out of Vijensky. As they leave, another group of soldiers is also leaving, heading to their next mission, and so the groups travel together for a little while. Bonton and Callum have a disagreement here. We discover that Bonton has a very negative view on religion, primarily because growing up in his town, which was in southern Dannon, the only experience he had with religion was with a religious cult that was very unkind to pretty much everyone and just kind of gave religion a bad name. And so it gives him a bad taste in his mouth. He also seems very upset by the implications that the Grey Lady is a goddess. He does not like religion, but he does love the Grey Lady because to him, the Grey Lady is the founder of Worm's Keep Castle Academy. Callum argues, is it possible that she's both? Could she both be a goddess and the founder of Worm's Keep Castle Academy? To which Bonton is like, no, she's just a person with powerful magical abilities. Maybe people decided to worship her for that, but she's not a goddess. That night, as they're camping, The soldiers they are traveling with turn on them and begin to attack them. They are clearly targeting Callum for whatever reason, except the captain of this group of soldiers, who just seems confused. He doesn't know what's going on. Eventually, the party manages to kill or incapacitate all of the enemy soldiers. They keep one alive for questioning, but discover that he doesn't have a lot of information. All he knows is that they were given orders, he doesn't know who from, to kill the blonde one. Callum is the only blonde member of the party, so it's assumed that they're talking about him. He doesn't know where the orders came from. He got them from another member in the squad who is now dead. The captain has no idea what he's talking about, and the captain is afraid to go back to Vajensky because clearly whoever ordered this didn't trust the captain enough to put the orders through him. So he believes that if he goes back to Vajensky with the information that they failed and Callum is still alive, that things will go badly for him. So after some discussion, the captain agrees to just essentially go into hiding, and the rest of the party takes the soldier off to the side, and realizing that there's no way to ensure that he won't go back and report Callum is alive and send more soldiers after him, the majority of the party agree to shield Callum's eyes as they take care of this final soldier. This still leaves Callum pretty broken. He now believes that there are many people who are dead because of him, that it's somehow his fault that all of these men who probably had family and friends and people who cared about them are now dead. And he gets really, really dejected. They decide to continue traveling, but go off-road so that they don't run as much of a risk of running into more soldiers. So they continue heading north, but off on side roads and such. And as they're traveling, that blue ghost light from weeks before appears again. This time it appears to Ugarth as he's on watch, and Ugarth decides to go examine the light. As Ugarth gets closer, the light forms up into the shape of a woman, and it almost appears to be as if there's a heavy rainstorm and a woman is being projected in light onto these raindrops. So she appears to be made out of raindrops. Ugarth throws a rock at it, nothing happens, just kind of this woman standing there. And Tau comes up, and as soon as Tau approaches, the woman disappears and is gone. A couple nights later, another group is on watch, and the light appears to Sahalia. Sahalia approaches the light, and she sees a woman who she believes is supposed to be the Pale Lady, but she knows it's not, and she asks the voice in her head, and the voice goes, "That's a poor imitation of me." Sahalia says, "We should not trust this blue light. I don't know what it is, but it's not divine." As they're traveling, they pass the town of Liraz, and usually in Gradian, towns are avoided. They all have their own ghost stories. Every major town is totally ruined. No one lives there except scavengers, and the army tends to just avoid it. But as they approach Liraz, they notice that it looks like it's being repaired. The walls have basic attempts at patching, and it appears like it might be habitated by people who are attempting to make a difference. As they get closer, they can tell that there are people inside, but a failed stealth check reveals that these people are not exactly inviting to strangers. There's an incredibly awkward interaction between Clover and a guard of this town, and when I say guard in quotes, his weapon is a stick with like a broken piece of glass at the end. But eventually Dalamore comes up and is able to be like, "Hey, Gradian to Gradian, we're not going to hurt you. We're not with the army. It's okay." And they agree to let the party in to the town. As the party circles around the city to come in through the main gate, they discover that a black handprint has been painted onto the main gates of Liraz. And that's where our last session left off. And now you can pick right up with us as we enter into session 8.